Aston Villa are 2 points off Liverpool at the top of the table after they beat Arsenal 1-0, and that result follows their midweek win over the champions Manchester City by the very same scoreline. What a week for Unai Emery's side. So, Miguel, that is a record 15 wins in a row at home. How impressive was that performance yesterday, given the fact that they'd got the win over City midweek, and the little stat that they have also used the least players so far this season?
Yeah, an element of Leicester City about that, actually.
Yeah,
I know we maybe don't want to get into that chat just yet. But I think it was all the more impressive, not just because they followed the City game, but because I suppose the way the City game evidently influenced this. It would have taken so much out of them, given they, to be honest, I haven't seen anyone do that to Guardiola City while he's been in England, or Guardiola team while he's been in England. Whereas yesterday was a very different sort of performance. Maybe kind of what you would associate with more classic Emery in terms of responding to the opposition. Arsenal had the better of the game, I would say. But they dug in. They found a way. I mean, it was an element of fortune, I'd say, particularly with the Odegaard chance. But that's going to happen, especially after what happened in midweek. And I mean, it does speak to, as well as the excellent kind of tactical and technical coaching that we've seen from Emery. And particularly, I mean, some of the risks Villa take in some games actually remarkable with that high line. But also, I think the emotional coaching and what it's done for the atmosphere and the entire club, which you can kind of feel with every home game. And that has a power in games like yesterday in helping them come through that. And it feels a very special time, I feel, at the moment, and for a club that's been waiting a long time for this.
If he needed Premier League redemption, is he getting it in abundance right
now?
Yeah,
completely. And I suppose there's a symbolism given who he was playing yesterday and where he was. I must say, I do think the way Emery plays, and it's interesting that this happens because it's rare. Given we spoke earlier about how, Guardiola's football has dominated the game for the last 15 years. Emery was always seen as someone who went against that, particularly in Spain, and that kind of characterised his Villarreal and Sevilla teams where he had most success. Didn't necessarily work at Arsenal. Didn't work in the same way at PSG, but PSG is a different case altogether because of what's happening. Whereas now with Villa, we're seeing, I mean, again, the height of that line is amazing. And I suppose it's correcting what went wrong at Arsenal, but also feels like he himself has evolved in that sense. And there's a lot of vindication. And no matter what happens this season from here on in, okay, there might be a disappointment, say, if Villa don't come through with maybe a trophy, Champions League qualification, but it's already been a huge success.
Yeah, it certainly has. Darren, it was interesting to hear from John McGinn, obviously the captain and goal scorer yesterday, say that it does take time for Unai Emery's point to get across in terms of what he wants, his methods. But he said he's also got passion, attention to detail, he's ambitious and realistic, and he's kind of like an arm around as well. So he's got the whole package, hasn't he? He's
got a fantastic package, you're right. And full disclosure, we were talking about this before the show began, and I just wanted the chance to gush a little bit about Unai Emery. But not just gush because he's done well. His managerial record is outstanding. He was a midfielder as a player, he had a knee injury, I think it was, and he retired. And ever since he began coaching, he's had fantastic results in exactly the way you've just described. When he managed Lorca and he took them up into the top division in Spain. He was at Almeria, took them into the top division in Spain for the first time in their history. He was at Valencia, 3 consecutive top 3 finishes. Goes to Sevilla, wins the old UEFA Cup and the Europa League 3 times in succession. You talk about PSG, he won the title there, he won 2 League Cups, he won 2 French Cups. His record was outstanding, and one of those years he won what you could term the quadruple. And then he goes to Villarreal with a team largely made up of players that were cast-offs from other clubs, and wins the Europa League and then gets to the semi-final of the Champions League. This is a guy with a seriously good pedigree. So what he's doing at Villa, I know lots of people say, well, it's too soon, but if you look at his body of work, you kind of think to yourself, well, there is everything to suggest that he can see this through, whether it's in terms of winning a cup competition or getting them into the Champions League, or, dare I say it, because a lot of people say, well, they're not title contenders, but they've beaten City, they've beaten Arsenal. What more do they need to do to prove that they're in the mix?
Just on the one thing I'd say in the title race, I suppose, and this comes to the point about the 11 he's used, is, and okay, there was a caveat yesterday because they obviously played on Wednesday and that would have taken so much out of them. But maybe the slight concern is, and this is how title races develop is that they don't necessarily have that depth. And that speaks to kind of bigger issues about kind of where Villa are in their development as a club compared to the kind of the wealthier powers. Although there is money in Villa, to be fair, but it's a developing club in that sense. And you would think maybe over the longer term that will eventually have an effect. And I suppose maybe he's got to correct their away record a bit as well. But at the moment, it's offset by that incredible home record.
I agree with the away record because it's nowhere near as good as the home record. And that if they had won maybe 2 or 3 of the games that they've drawn or lost away from home, they'd be top of the league at the moment. But in terms of the depth, well, exactly. Yeah. In terms of the depth, would you not look at the transfer window upcoming and think there's an opportunity perhaps to get 1 or 2 players, particularly a striker, for example, to take the pressure off Ollie Watkins, maybe more depth in midfield? Is there an opportunity there for them to bring in that personnel that says, OK, they do have that quality to bring off the bench?
And they do have money, Villa, as well. I suppose all of this is almost predicated on, it's something like David was discussing a moment ago, whether this is going to be a kind of a normal season in the context of the last few years, and City, say, go on a run, and the expectation is 85 to 90 points. Because if it drops off, then suddenly we're talking about, well, is there an opening here? And Liverpool are building again. Arsenal, we know they're there, but I suppose there's that question over being a team or a club that's around the top but can actually go and get over the line. And if not, then there's a potential opening. I mean, I suppose maybe everyone's still, and we'll get onto this later, but everyone's still waiting for City to just finally put a run together. But if they don't, then suddenly we're into uncharted territory a little bit for the last few years.
They seem to do it over the final furlong, don't they?
Yeah.
They just say, we'll have to wait and see. You all say they do. Anyway, let's get to Arsenal then. What happened to them? Did the decisions go against them, do you feel, Darren?
Yeah, there is a feeling. I know you feel very strongly that their goal should have stood.
Well, I'm wavering a little bit on that now, I have to say.
Yeah. After coffee, he's kind of changed his mind.
Yeah, we'll get back to that. But just, I think Arsenal have an issue scoring goals. They've scored 7 fewer goals this season than last season. Jesus is fantastic, but he scored twice. I think it's in 11 games in the Premier League. Martinelli, I think, has only scored a couple of times as well. Nketiah has scored 5 goals. I don't really see Saka as being on the hook because he's carried the team pretty much on his back for the last couple of seasons. Odegaard scored, I think, 4 or 5 goals. But are there enough goals in that team? The defensive record is fantastic, but in moments where you do need somebody to step up, maybe a prolific striker or somebody who's going to nudge you into the double figures. They've done it before. Last season they scored loads of goals, but they imploded towards the end. But they're just hitting the wall at the moment in terms of finding that breakthrough.
Go on, talk us through your decision-making then. So why have you wavered one way or the other?
I mean, I suppose looking at it straight, first of all, I think it was very difficult to really see clearly what actually happened in it.
Yeah.
Which is maybe I was slightly surprised at the assertiveness of the referee straight away. I think the issue I would say now isn't so much the decision as it stood, because you can see why the referee made it. It's probably kind of the farce of the handball rules, really.
Yes.
Which is a different issue to the decision being made in the moment. Especially this kind of, I mean, where Cash appears to handle it and whether it could be perceived that affected what happened, whether if the rules should be redrawn, that if it affects the striker in that way, it should also affect it. Because currently, like, the defender would be given a reprieve for that, whereas the forward would be punished. And also initially, I must say, because there was such a scramble, it looked like it could have been Nketiah that put it in, which would have meant Havertz's handball was relevant. But even that, the sequence of that, doesn't feel like it's that logical, because if you gain an advantage, you gain an advantage. But no, more like, I think I put up a social media post yesterday where I said I felt I should have stood. Now I'm a bit more lenient towards the referee, but equally you can understand the frustration from Arsenal.
He's changed his mind 4 times.
I love that.
I pointed it low, wasn't that?
Completely clear and obvious then.
Yeah.
Exactly what you think. I mean, I think the rule, though, is certainly something that Jamie Redknapp discussed. It's actually ridiculous.
Like, UEFA have spoken about how, like, do we understand the handball law?
No.
And I suppose this is one of the issues that VAR has created, where because we can because we can view the game in more minute detail in real time, it actually just makes laws a necessity for laws to be more complicated.
Yes, rather than keep them clear and obvious.
Yeah.
Dare I say. OK, I've used that a lot, too much. Right, what are the papers saying about this, Darren?
Well, you've gone into great depth about about Unai Emery, forgive me. So we kind of get a pretty good idea of what your piece in the Independent today says. So I'm going to go to the Telegraph instead. And there's a specific reason why I'm doing this, because John McGinn, I really liked his interview yesterday, his flash interview after the match, where he said, look, I've got far too much respect for all the teams that have been in the top 6 for so long to suddenly start talking about us as title contenders. And he said he's banned the T word. You know, that's real captaincy and leadership. He wants to just mark it, the games off like Jordan Henderson did, for example, with Liverpool when they won it.
Although Unai Emery said if we win today, we're in the title race.
Well, he can say that, but the players, they're kind of keeping a lid on it. Sam Wallace's piece, the respected Sam Wallace, actually does say that they are in a title race, and rightly so. They've piled up the points, they've won the games, they've pulled off the performances, and they're beating the quality sides. The idea that they haven't been tested is just not true. They have been. We are approaching the halfway stage, and Sam says they scored a wonderful team goal, the kind of goals that players in confidence score with a degree of confidence. And this piece here explains why he feels that they are in the mix and talks about the impact that Unai Emery is having, much the same as Miguel's been saying. One other piece as well. This is a little bit more intriguing. Jamie Redknapp on the Sky Sports website. Let's have a look. And you were talking about the nuts and bolts of the handball decision that was made yesterday. What I'm more referring to with this one is Arteta's reaction, because it was very cryptic, as has been described. And for me, it's a real shame. But I think there are scars from the Newcastle game, after which he was very effusive. He was very open about how he felt. This is an emotional game. I remember saying to you at the time, where are we going if grown men can't articulate their emotions around a game and the fine margins on which potentially their ambitions, maybe even their jobs, hinge? And what we've got is a movement from Arteta, from being open about how he feels to being cryptic. I don't think any one of us in our jobs, the information business, would want to be at a place where managers are being cryptic instead of being honest and open about how they feel, so that we can have a grown-up discussion.
You wonder, and whether I'm opening a can of worms here, but after the match, whether there's a little bit of leeway in terms of what a manager might say straight after a match than a reflective piece, perhaps in the press conference, because sometimes they want to talk openly and honest, and they're kind of prevented that because they know they might bring the game into disrepute. I'm not asking them to slate people openly, but it might be nice to think that there might be a little bit of give and take in that.
Well, absolutely. This is exactly my point. Nobody wants referees to be disrespected. No. Nobody wants referees to be traduced. But what we want is to be able to have adult, grown-up conversations. And I think if we can get to that point where a manager can say how he feels without everyone coming down on him like a ton of bricks, I think we all benefit from the value of their wisdom.
Yeah, I would agree with that.